Hey everyone, and welcome back to Wealthy Brains. Steve discusses how wealth becomes transferred during periods of crisis. He says commodities have never been so cheap relative to paper assets. He argues that today is a generational wealth transfer opportunity. His macro thesis is that the national debt is mathematically impossible to repay. History has shown that politicians will always try to inflate away the debt. He has found that simplicity outperforms complex systems every time. And he outlines the tools he finds most useful. Steve finds ratio comparisons helpful in determining sector strengths. Lately, many complicated theories surround the US dollar, but he makes a more straightforward bearish argument for the dollar. Steve discusses how gold historically can move in multiples over just a few years and how past price action makes a compelling case for multiples of today's prices. He finds SIL.J to be very undervalued. He says, the macro case for uranium is just off the charts. Currently, the all-in cost to mine uranium is well below current prices. In the long term, uranium will be an excellent play, and we are at the beginning of a long-term move. Today, the two largest producers are curtailing production in a time when demand is increasing. The silver market might be headed in the short, the medium, and the long term. Steve Penny, aka Silver Chartist, thinks that we're headed for an intermediate $50 top in silver around the year 2020. However, long term, he sees silver going to $300 and says that $600 is not too far out of the left field. This is not just another guy calling for crazy high explosive silver prices. Steve stays rational and logical in his research, and he did so in this call as well. The Silver Chartist told me that if you study the previous two bull markets in silver and you adjust the results for inflation, you'll eventually come out with $300 silver as the conservative target for silver. Tom welcomes back Steve Penny. Steve is a full-time trader specializing in silver, gold, and uranium. Steve feels the US dollar remains in the classic definition of a downtrend, and the current pattern is similar to a previous failed breakout. Both the fundamentals and technicals appear bearish over the intermediate to long term. Silver remains in an uptrend, and we have been bouncing upwards off the 50-day moving average. Once we overcome resistance, we will be off to the races in silver. Steve likes to trade a small percentage of his portfolio and how he plans his trades weekly. This approach allows him to reduce emotion and helps him make a better trade. The gold-silver ratio reaching 120 was an unprecedented event, and he believes we could see 20 to 1 or higher near the end of this bull market. Silver miners are still undervalued compared to everything else, and over the long term, he expects them to outperform wildly. He discusses the long-term patterns for gold, and even if we have a pullback, we are still solidly in a bull trend. He is very bullish on platinum because its valuations recently reached historic levels relative to gold. It's quite likely we will outperform to the upside and perhaps even overcorrect. Lastly, Steve discusses why uranium is a growth industry and why the price must rise to incentivize new production. It's such a small market that large investment firms entering will have an outsized effect on uranium shares. Timestamp references 0 seconds, intro 45 seconds, US dollar, DXY, chart 3 minutes 3 seconds, silver chart 4 minute 51 seconds. Steve Penny is a full-time trader and investor specializing in the silver, gold, and uranium markets. Mr. Penny shares his unique insights and chart-based trading setups on his popular Twitter feed. Mr. Penny served as an Air Force pilot for 15 years and now flies for the airlines. Steve has launched a free weekly chart pack report, which is available on his website. Steve said that we are headed for a currency crisis and called that a mathematical fact. With that out of the way, I asked Steve to update me on what is going on with silver in 2021 so far. So we talked about the silver demand, silver supply, and most about silver manipulation. The Silver Chartist believes that eventually the manipulation of silver will end and that banks will end up on the other side. Being long silver, he thinks that Silver Squeeze 2.0 might be a very helpful step. Steve also told me that this is a marathon and not a sprint. The removing of the silver shorts might be a process that takes years, but according to Steve, it is inevitable. Steve Penny believes that people raising awareness to Silver Squeeze 2.0 is very good and adds to the general case. The Silver Chartist thinks that silver is essential to everyone's portfolio and that everybody should own at least some physical gold and silver. I agree with Steve on that one, as I too like buying scrap silver and junk silver at yard sales and more. However, the most leverage to the silver price is still being offered by exploration and development companies. One early stage exploration silver stock that Steve likes is Reina Silver. As a mid tier, Steve did mention that he likes Silver Crest quite a lot. And as what he calls top tier companies, he likes Metella Royalty and First Majestic Silver, which are also silver companies that I like and own in my farm's demo portfolio. We talked a little bit about the Chartist exiting silver strategy, and he says that he likes playing with the house's money, which means selling a portion of one's position after the stock has ran to recoup the capital and leaving the rest to run freely. Steve said he'll start collecting profits on his silver stocks at $50 silver, but will hold at least some exposure to silver stocks until silver hits $300, which he thinks is very likely to happen. I very much enjoyed Steve's view on technical analysis, and when it comes down to silver, the Silver Chartist likes keeping it simple when it comes down to technical analysis. He likes using obvious support and resistance and some basic chart patterns like the bull flag, a triangle pattern, and a cup and handle formation. Steve also has a unique view of the gold to silver ratio. He doesn't only take into account the paper ratio, but he also takes the junior silver stocks to junior gold stocks ratio by using a couple of ETFs. I found that an interesting point, and we'll be testing the working of those through the next couple of months as silver grows in value and in price. Steve sends out a free weekly newsletter and offers a paid one for the people who want to take their silver updates to the higher level. I'd recommend starting with the free one to see if this is something for you and eventually upgrading if you find the extra leverage. And eventually upgrading if you find you need the extra leverage. Steve feels the US dollar remains the classic definition of a downtrend, and the current pattern is similar to a previous failed breakout. Both the fundamentals and technicals appear bearish over the intermediate to long term. Silver remains in an uptrend, and we have been bouncing upwards off the 50-day moving average. Once we overcome resistance, we will be off to the races in silver. Steve likes to trade a small percentage of his portfolio how he plans his trades weekly. This approach allows him to reduce emotion and helps him make a better trader. The gold-silver ratio reaching 120 was an unprecedented event, and he believes we could see 20 to 1 or higher near the end of this bull market. Silver miners are still undervalued compared to everything else, and over the long term, he expects them to outperform wildly. He discusses the long-term patterns for gold, and even if we have a pullback, we are still solidly in a bull trend. He is very bullish on platinum because its valuations recently reached historic levels relative to gold. It's quite likely we will outperform to the upside and perhaps even overcorrect. That is all for today, folks. Would you like to add anything? Let us know in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new. And I'll see you in the next video.